So I hand it over to Leah Bamberger and also Jeffrey Dana, and they'll be walking us through the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. My name is Leah Bamberger. I'm the Director of Sustainability for the City of Providence, and I'm here with my colleague, Jeff, the City Solicitor. As Director of Sustainability, it is my job to ensure that the city is thinking long-term about how we develop as a community. And it's important that we think about what are known as the 3 E's of sustainability: equity, environment, and our economy. Are we on the, oh, we can go to the next slide, sorry for that. So the key point is these 3 E's in sustainability is really about how these issues are interconnected. And our finances, the city's finances, are intrinsically connected to each other. I'm having a little technical difficulty here. Hold on a second. There we go. So as the mayor mentioned, the crisis is not today or tomorrow, but if we fail to do anything, the day will come when we really will be faced with tough decisions between how we invest in our schools, how we make infrastructure investments, and how we continue to protect our water supply. It's really our collective responsibility as government officials, politicians, and really every single resident and business in Providence to do everything we can to manage these resources so that day doesn't come. And it's not going to be easy. We are facing what is known as a wicked problem. And this is not just a New England phrase, this is actually a definition, a thing that is talked about around the world in policy and business as we face more challenging problems, essentially problems that have not been fixed because all the easy problems have been solved. So a wicked problem is defined as something that has innumerable causes, is tough to describe, and doesn't have a right answer. Climate change, terrorism, poverty, these are all classic examples of a wicked problem. So these are problems that can't be solved in a finite time period by applying standard approaches. They require collaboration, openness, iteration, and creativity. There's no easy solution. But as Mayor said, we must take action. If we choose to kick the can down the road, our options will become fewer and more painful. So Jeff and I are going to take the next 20 minutes to share a lot of information. We know there will be a lot of questions and comments, but to make sure that we have time to hear from everyone who has questions, we ask that you write those down, as Teresa mentioned, and raise your hand, and the moderator will come to you to collect the question. Or if you need additional pieces of paper, they'll provide those as well. And again, we're doing this so we have an opportunity to hear from everyone, and we get through all the questions that you have here this evening. In addition, LaVon here, is taking notes for us, so we are capturing and bringing back all of the feedback that we hear this evening. So how did we get here? There are 2 driving forces that cause the problem that we are working on today. Essentially, the first part of it is the city made promises it couldn't keep. Made promises to our retirees, giving out benefits that we didn't have, we knew we weren't going to have to pay at the time, the city wasn't going to have to pay at the time. And at the same time, the city failed to pay into the pension system or meet the current obligations that it had. So simply put, the city gave retirees more and more each year and didn't pay for it. In effect, we were writing very generous IOUs, knowing that the bill wouldn't come for decades. Well, the bill has come, it is here, and we knew it was coming. And over the past 2 decades, past administrations have done some really challenging work to revise those agreements to the maximum extent possible. They avoided the short-term threat of bankruptcy and stabilized the city's finances, which provided us with the foundation and the time that we have today for this administration to address the long-term pension crisis. As the mayor would say, we have stabilized the patient, stopped the bleeding, but we are far from healed.
So as Leah said, the city has done a lot of hard work, particularly over the last couple decades, to address the problem that was a long time in the making of these IOUs. In particular, the administration, the city under the administrations of Mayors Cicilline, Taveras, and now Mayor Elorza, have really worked hard to get us to the point we are now, where we are not facing the threat of bankruptcy imminently, and where we're doing okay. The city is in a good place right now. But all of those steps, while they avoided bankruptcy and put us in a relatively good place, did not address the major pending imminent problem of a huge unfunded pension liability. We still really don't have a solution yet to the large hole in our pension fund that eventually could result in the city being unable to make its payments, to pay its bills. So, folks, there's been a lot of talk about pension reform, and back in 2012, the city made some really good steps towards pension reform and painful decisions that it works through collectively with the various city unions and retirees. And that resulted in COLAs being capped. That's the cost of living allowances. So retirees for a 10-year period aren't getting any increases in their annual pension payments. And it really staved off bankruptcy, which was at the doorstep. But what it didn't do was address what happens when the COLAs come back into play in 2023, which is what's going to happen in the beginning of 2023. COLAs will start getting paid again. But more important than that, it didn't solve the problem of how we actually put the money back into the pension fund that needs to be in there so that we can pay the retirees what they're entitled to. We're currently on a 30-year schedule that was established back in 2012, and we're paying it now, but the payments are going to increase to a very unsustainable level. And I think the next slide. So this is a really, I think, helpful slide to illustrate the problem. So the blue bars are the payments that the city will be expected to make over the course of the next 20 some odd years to cover our obligations to people who are currently employed by the city and retire. Those are normal payments that you'd expect as part of a normal city budget, and they are manageable. The red bars are the problem. The red bars are the IOUs that Lee was talking about. That's essentially a credit card payment plan for the city to make up for all of the ARP payments that weren't made over time, that weren't made to cover the promises that were made. And they eventually get to extremely unsustainable levels. If we were not having to pay for those mistakes of the past, you would expect the annual payments to be between $20 and $40 million a year, not, I believe they get up to over $150 million in 2040. The red bars are really the problem, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here, and that's why we've been spending all this time trying to figure out how to reduce those bars and make it so the city doesn't end up in bankruptcy. So what's the impact if we just say, whatever, we'll leave those red bars as they are and do nothing? There's no doubt that there'll be serious pain for all stakeholders if we just do nothing. We'll lose critical city services, and it's possible some city assets will be sold off. There's no doubt that there'd have to be an increase in taxes, there would be budget deficits, school funding would be cut, and we wouldn't have the resources available to fix roads, fix sidewalks, take care of parks and recreation centers, the kind of things that you need to do to have a city that folks want to live in. Eventually, as that slide says, eventually we could actually be unable to pay our bills. So that leads us to Providence Water. I know a lot of folks in here because of the proposals we've put forward regarding Providence Water. Now, the stuff that is listed on the last slide are things that are just things that we shouldn't even contemplate. We can't get to a point where we're a city functioning merely to make pension payments. So Providence Water is our most valuable asset. It's the most valuable asset that Providence has. That's why this has been discussed for decades. As the mayor mentioned when he started, this is not a new concept to utilize our asset, Providence Water, to assist with the pension problem. The past several administrations of the city, going back 30 years, have made various proposals of this nature. It's really the only asset we have that is capable of providing the revenue we need to solve the problem. And it's a certain situation where folks get very nervous about it. And we're not in a crisis yet, so people don't really want us to do anything. They don't want to touch Providence Water. But this is kind of repeating what I was saying before, but these are things we don't want to do. And we could get to a point where none of them, even combined, would fix the problem, which would eventually lead to a bankruptcy. And that is the absolute last option we should be considering. That is something that would result in all of these things anyways, these alternatives. If the city were ever in bankruptcy, taxes would increase substantially. We would definitely have to make cuts to all city services. And Providence, all of our assets would be at risk, including Providence Water. We would lose a lot of control over what could happen with Providence Water. And those are things we just don't want to risk.
So I understand, as Jeff mentioned, a lot of people are here because they're concerned about our water supply. And that concern is completely understandable. And so we want to talk about a little bit of our values and why we're doing this and how we're approaching Providence Water. We believe that water is our most valuable asset, and we must do absolutely everything we can to protect it today and for forever. We are working towards a future where we don't have to make these tough budgetary decisions about whether to protect our water supply or to fund our schools and invest in our youth. And we are doing this all in a way that upholds the values that are on the screen here, which are that water is a fundamental human right, that as a result it should be managed democratically and with input from everyone, and that's why we are here having these conversations today. And it is our collective responsibility to really think critically, understand, and address this complex problem. We cannot stick our head in the sand and ignore facts that we just don't like. So how will it work? The city would retain ownership of the water supply. We're not selling the water or the water supply. We believe that ownership is absolutely critical so that we can ensure three key components of the partnership, which are rate stability, water quality, and the rights of our labor. In addition to that, there would be continued oversight from both the Public Utilities Commission and the Department of Health. And again, our goal here is to leverage this asset in a controlled way so that we ultimately don't lose control of it in the face of bankruptcy.
And one thing to keep in mind, those central tenets of what the city is looking at trying to do with Providence Water are critical and ones to which we would hold fast. If we can't enter into any kind of partnership that would ensure water quality, long-term rate stability, and protection of our labor, we just won't do it. This is something that is something we hold hard and fast, and we will not compromise those principles. We're actually trying to avoid being forced to compromise those principles at some point down the road. This is hard stuff, and as the mayor mentioned earlier, we're having these discussions, these community conversations, and conversations with many stakeholders, because we want the feedback, we want back and forth, and we're open to any constructive, helpful, suggested solutions. This is a wicked problem, and it's important for the residents of the city of Providence, the residents of the state of Rhode Island, and for all consumers of Providence water that we solve this, or there'll be problems for us down the road.
So, with that, I'd like to, again, think about your questions, write them down, raise your hand if you have a question written down. We'll come grab those from you. I'd also like to invite Nicole Pollack, the Chief of Staff, and Larry Mancini, Director of Finance, to the front, and we'll be hearing your questions.